For centuries, a pirate's secret fortune has been lost beneath the waves. Buried treasure that has defied discovery, claimed lives, and sparked legends. Who was Captain Kidd? And does his hidden gold still wait to be found? Join us as we dive into the mystery that has haunted explorers for over 300 years. Captain William Kidd was no ordinary pirate. Once a respected privateer, he became one of history's most infamous figures, accused of betrayal and piracy. But before his downfall, legend says he buried a vast treasure along the eastern coast of America: gold, jewels, and secrets worth millions. This treasure has never been fully found, and the search has spanned centuries, inspiring mystery, danger, and obsession. Today, we unravel the story behind Captain Kidd's treasure, a tale of adventure, betrayal, and an enduring legend that still captures imaginations. The sea was calm that morning, stretching endlessly beneath a sky brushed with the pink and gold of dawn. But beneath its stillness, legends stirred. For centuries, whispers of a hidden treasure have drifted like mist over the waters of the Atlantic: buried gold, cursed fortunes, and one name that echoes through the stormy past of piracy: Captain William Kidd. Born in the harsh streets of Dundee, Scotland, Kidd wasn't always destined for infamy. He started not as a pirate, but as a man of duty, a privateer, commissioned by the British Crown to hunt pirates and protect shipping lanes. A man of principle, or so they said. But somewhere between the lures of nations and the hunger for gold, Kidd's compass began to spin. It is said that before his arrest, Kidd buried an immense treasure along the eastern shores of North America: gold coins, rare jewels, and untold artifacts of vanished empires. Some believe it was a desperate act, a final attempt to bargain for his freedom. Others say it was never real at all, just a myth to fan the flames of fear and wonder. But then, why do people still search? From the rocky coast of Gardiners Island to the mysteries of Oak Island's money pit, treasure hunters, historians, and dreamers continue to chase Kidd's ghost. Shovels hit dirt. Sonas sweep the ocean floor. Still, the question lingers like sea spray on the wind: did Captain Kidd really bury his treasure? And if he did, where is it now? The waves remember. And so do the legends. Long before he became a name whispered in the dark, William Kidd walked the bustling docks of New York, not as a criminal, but as a respected sailor. It was the late 1600s, and the seas teemed with danger. Pirates roamed unchecked, and the British Empire sought to bring order to the chaos. In 1695, Kidd was chosen for a noble mission: to command the adventure galley and hunt down pirates in the Indian Ocean. He accepted with pride, believing he would be a hero in the eyes of the Crown. He was even granted a privateering license, legally allowing him to capture enemy ships and keep a share of the loot. But the line between pirate and privateer was thin, and out on the open sea, it often vanished entirely. As his crew grew restless and money ran dry, Kidd faced an impossible choice. His men, many of them former pirates, demanded plunder. Tensions flared. Discipline broke down. Then, one day, Kidd attacked a ship that wasn't legally a target. It was the Quidar Merchant, an Armenian vessel sailing under French protection. Kidd justified the attack, but the damage was done. The British labelled him a pirate. News travelled fast, faster than Kidd could return. By the time he sailed back to New York, he was no longer a hero. He was a wanted man, hunted not by pirates, but by the very government that had once trusted him. Cornered and desperate, Kidd made a decision that would cement his legend. He sailed toward a small, private island off the coast of Long Island. The place was called Gardiners Island. And there, he began to dig. Gardiners Island lay quiet under a grey, early morning sky. The waves lapped against its rocky shores as Captain Kidd's ship dropped anchor offshore. With a skeleton crew, Kidd rowed to land under the cover of secrecy. Time was slipping away, and he knew it. The British authorities were closing in. He needed leverage, something to buy back his freedom. And so, he brought ashore chests, crates, and sealed barrels. What lay inside those containers has fed centuries of speculation. Gold coins minted in Spain, emeralds from the East Indies, silk, silver, and maps inked with ancient trade routes. Some say it wasn't only riches, but documents, proof of his innocence, items that could expose corruption within the very government that now branded him a traitor. With spades and bare hands, Kidd and his men dug deep into the earth. They hid the goods in a place only he would remember. Perhaps he marked it with stones or carved a secret into the bark of a tree. What's certain is this: the treasure was real. It was later found by colonial authorities, and portions of it were recovered and sent to England as evidence against him. But that's only part of the legend. For Kidd spoke of more. In hushed tones, he hinted at additional caches hidden elsewhere, perhaps in coves along the Hudson River or beneath the sands of Nova Scotia. Some believe Gardiners Island was just the beginning, a distraction to mask a much larger fortune buried in darkness. And so, as he was taken in chains, Kidd may have smiled. The treasure was safe, somewhere, waiting, and no one alive knew where. When Captain Kidd returned to New York, it was not to cheers but to cold suspicion. Rumors had reached the colonies before his sails had even touched the horizon. Tales of betrayal, piracy, and greed. Once a man of the crown, Kidd now found himself branded an outlaw. He was arrested in 1699, shackled in iron, and eventually shipped to England aboard the frigate Advice. There, he would stand trial in one of the most sensational court cases of the 17th century. The charges? Piracy and murder. The murder charge came from an incident at sea. Kidd had struck a mutinous gunner named William Moore with an iron-bound bucket. The man later died, and that act, too, was used against him. The trial was more spectacle than justice. Kidd's attempts to present evidence, especially documents proving his orders and the French parcels of ships he had seized, were ignored or mysteriously missing. Some believe the British government wanted him silenced to keep their own misdeeds buried. After a swift and bitter hearing, Captain Kidd was sentenced to death. On May 23, 1701, he was led to the gallows at Execution Dock in London. The rope broke on the first try, an ominous sign in the eyes of many, but on the second attempt, the deed was done. His body was later dipped in tar and hung in a metal cage over the River Thames as a warning to others. But if they hoped to end the legend, they failed. Instead, a darker mystery emerged. Kidd had died, but his treasure remained missing. What he had hidden, what he had hinted at, none of it was ever fully found. His final words were never recorded, but many believe he took his secrets to the grave. And that's when the real treasure hunt began. Long after the gallows fell silent, whispers of Captain Kidd's treasure began to stir again. This time not in courtrooms or colonial harbours, but in candlelit taverns, wind-battered fishing villages, and salt-crusted sailor songs. Stories began to surface, stories of cryptic maps, strange carvings on rocks, and journals written in trembling hands claiming to have found a marks left by Kidd himself. Some claimed he scratched signs into stone or trees. Others believed he entrusted a map to a loyal crewman who vanished into the American wilderness. One tale even told of Kidd burying a silver-shod Bible along with the treasure as both a warning and a promise. Most of these claims were wild, fueled by hearsay and rum. But they all shared a single truth: no one ever found the full treasure. Gardiners Island had surrendered some of it, yes, but not the vast fortune Kidd was believed to have plundered across the Indian Ocean. That wealth, worth millions in today's gold, was still missing. Where was the rest? Some said Kidd left riddles hidden in old sailor logs or inscribed onto the inside of his ship's hull. Others claimed it was all a bluff, a smokescreen meant to delay his execution. But if that were true, why did even British officials believe there was more? Why did they send search parties to scour islands and inlets? The legend became a puzzle, fragments of truth wrapped in layers of myth. But one thing remains certain: where there is a whisper of treasure, someone will always listen. And soon, the hunt would stretch beyond Gardiners Island, toward a place far more mysterious. A place called Oak Island. Off the coast of Nova Scotia lies a small, forested island barely visible on most maps, Oak Island. Just 140 acres of land surrounded by jagged rocks and swirling tides. But to treasure hunters around the world, it is hallowed ground. Because here, buried deep beneath layers of earth and legend, some believe Captain Kidd's true treasure lies hidden. The story begins in 1795, when a teenager named Daniel McGuinness stumbled upon a strange depression in the ground. Curious, he returned with friends and started digging. Just a few feet down, they struck flagstones, then a layer of logs, and then another. Every 10 feet, another timber barrier. At 90 feet deep, they hit something harder, what they believed was a vault. But when they returned the next day, the pit had filled with water. No matter how fast they bailed, it refilled, rising like the tide itself was guarding whatever lay beneath. It became known as the Money Pit. Over the centuries, dozens of teams tried to excavate it. They found strange stones with mysterious carvings, fragments of old chains, bits of parchment, and even coconut fibers, items that didn't belong on a cold northern island. But every effort was thwarted. Flood tunnels, cave-ins, booby traps. Some men died trying. Others lost fortunes. Yet no one gave up. Why Oak Island? Some say Kidd sailed this far north during his final days and used the island's natural traps to protect his greatest secret. Others suggest he worked with the Templars, or buried sacred relics alongside his loot. There are even those who claim the island itself is cursed, guarded by spirits, and that 7 men must die before the treasure will reveal itself. So far, 6 have. Truth? Legend? Perhaps both. But as the centuries rolled on, one thing became clear. The treasure of Captain Kidd had become more than gold. It had become obsession. As tales of Oak Island spread, so did a wave of supposed discoveries. Men arrived from across the world carrying tattered scrolls, rusted compasses, and faded parchments they claimed were Captain Kidd's lost maps. Some showed crude coastlines, others dotted lines leading to marked excess near coves and cliffs. But none ever led to the treasure. Still, the allure grew stronger. In the 19th century, Several books were published claiming to have decoded kids' clues. One even claimed that the Royal treasure was buried not on Oak Island, but along the banks of the Hudson River, where Kidd had once sailed freely. Another pointed fingers toward the Carolinas, while others argued the true hoard rested beneath Boston Harbor or even Manhattan itself. Historians tried to trace Kidd's every known move, from the Caribbean to the Indian Ocean. But his path was like the sea, shifting, fluid, and filled with contradiction. Letters from his crew hinted at secret landings. Colonial records mentioned sightings of his ships in strange, uncharted places. One journal, thought to be from a ship's carpenter, told of a night when Kidd ordered 12 barrels unloaded onto a rocky shore beneath moonlight, then threatened to kill any man who returned. But were these real accounts? Or just the imaginations of men dazzled by gold? One thing became clear: the more people searched, the more fragmented the truth became. For every supposed map, 12 theories. For every stone turned, more questions. Captain Kidd's treasure wasn't just hiding beneath the ground anymore. It had burrowed into the minds of men and refused to let go. And in the shadows of obsession, danger was never far behind. As the decades passed, the hunt for Captain Kidd's treasure evolved from mere curiosity into a fevered race. Men sold their homes to fund expeditions. Partnerships formed and broke apart. Friendships were shattered. Some treasure hunters went mad. Others disappeared. And still, the treasure stayed hidden. In 1867, a wealthy company called the Oak Island Association nearly destroyed the money pit in their effort to uncover its secrets. They dug deep, built shafts, drained water, but the island fought back. Tunnels collapsed. Machinery failed. Explosions shook the ground. A worker died when a platform gave way, plunging him into a watery grave. His was one of the first recorded deaths tied to the legend. Yet even death could not deter the search. Every new generation brought fresh believers, engineers, scholars, adventurers. They came with new machines, new theories, new faith. Some spoke of Kidd's treasure. Others whispered of even greater secrets: the Ark of the Covenant, Shakespeare's manuscripts, Templar relics. But Kidd's name always remained central. His legend was the seed from which this tangled tree of mystery had grown. What drove these people? Was it gold? Glory? Or something more ancient? The need to believe that somewhere, hidden beneath the earth, lies a truth big enough to change everything? The island, for all its silence, seemed alive, always watching, always hiding. And the more men dug, the more it seemed to push back. Water would pour in where none should be. Markers would vanish overnight. Voices were heard when no one was there. They began to call it cursed. Yet the digging never stopped. Because as long as Captain Kidd's name was whispered, hope would never die. Captain Kidd's legend didn't just haunt sailors and treasure hunters. It captivated some of the most influential minds in American history. Among them was President Franklin D. Roosevelt. As a young man, Roosevelt visited Oak Island and took part in treasure digs himself. He later stayed closely connected to the excavations, even as he entered politics, believing firmly that the island hid something of great value, perhaps Kidd's long-lost fortune. He wasn't alone. The great American writer Edgar Allan Poe was also entranced by Kidd's tale. In 1843, he published The Gold Bug, a short story that revolved around a coded message and a hidden pirate treasure. inspired directly by Captain Kidd. Poe believed that codes and riddles might still hold the key, that Kidd had left behind a trail of clues for someone clever enough to follow. The story sparked a national frenzy. Readers across the country began digging in their backyards, convinced they'd solve the mystery themselves. Treasure fever was spreading like wildfire. Even Mark Twain is rumored to have taken interest in the legend, referencing pirate treasure and buried secrets in his writings. Kidd's story had crossed from folklore into the bloodstream of American culture. His name no longer belonged to history. It had become a mythic symbol of mystery, danger, and reward. The idea that Kidd's treasure might still lie waiting somewhere, untouched and found, was irresistible. Not just because of its value in gold, but because of what it promised: adventure, redemption, legacy, and for some, immortality. But while poets dreamed, others kept digging, deeper, harder, and closer to the edge of ruin. In 1929, a battered leather-bound book surfaced at an estate sale in Boston. It was fragile, its pages warped by age and sea air. The seller claimed it had belonged to a descendant of one of Captain Kidd's crewmen. Inside were sketches of coastlines, cryptic notes, and references to the Second Cove, ere Twin Stones, ere in something called the Devil's Mouth. Treasure hunters were electrified. Was this the long-lost journal of a sailor who had helped Kidd bury his treasure? If so, it could be the most important clue in 2 centuries. The journal mentioned coordinates, rough ones, and a dead tree with a crooked arm that pointed toward the hiding place. Some believed it referenced Oak Island. Others said it described a part of Long Island Sound. But most haunting of all was a passage near the end. He said it were not gold, not jewels, but a curse he buried there. I seen his eyes. Kidd knew what he'd done, and he swore the earth itself would guard it. The journal vanished shortly after it was sold to a private collector. Rumors say it now sits in a locked vault somewhere in Europe, never shared with historians or scholars. Others believe it was a hoax, an elaborate forgery designed to lure investors into another doomed treasure hunt. But the legend grew stronger because of it. Each mysterious document, every half-burned map, every whispered phrase etched into stone, seemed to feed the story. Kidd wasn't just a pirate anymore. He was a phantom. His ghost lingered not in the waves, but in ink and parchment, in riddles and shadows. And somewhere, maybe, that ghost was still watching. The deeper they dug, the stranger things became. Throughout the 20th century, treasure hunters on Oak Island and beyond unearthed more than just soil. Beneath layers of clay and bedrock, they found things that shouldn't be there. Fragments of chainmail, stone markers carved with indecipherable symbols, and tunnels that defied the engineering capabilities of the time. Coconut fiber was discovered buried 60 feet below the surface, an item native to the tropics, not to the icy shores of Nova Scotia. How did it get there? Some said it was proof of Kidd's presence. Others believed it pointed to ancient mariners, Phoenicians, perhaps, or even the Knights Templar. But through it all, Captain Kidd's name remained the thread tying every theory together. One of the strangest discoveries came in 1965, when treasure hunters claimed to find a vault-like structure beneath the money pit. As they lowered a camera into the flooded shaft, the flickering footage seemed to show what looked like chests, tools, and a severed hand clutching something. The camera jammed. The shaft collapsed days later. Nothing was retrieved. No proof. Just another ghost. Was it real? Was it staged? Or had the island, once again, swallowed its secrets? By now, the line between reality and legend was almost non-existent. The story of Captain Kidd had fused with the island itself. Each new find added a verse to the ongoing myth. Each failure deepened the obsession. And for those who stood on that lonely patch of rock, staring into the black pit, it was never just about treasure. It was about being the one who would finally break the curse and bring the truth into the light. Throughout the centuries, Oak Island has claimed lives. By the mid-1900s, 6 men had perished while searching for the treasure. Accidents, collapses, gas leaks, drownings. Each death was tragic, but together, they formed a chilling pattern, one that seemed to align with an old island legend: a 7 must die before the treasure reveals itself. No one knew where the saying came from. Some said it was rooted in Templar lore, others believed it was passed down from indigenous Mi'kmaq people who warned settlers never to dig on cursed ground. But whether it was folklore or prophecy, it left a mark. Digging became slower. Teams were more cautious. Yet the island waited. And the 7th man? No one knows who it will be. Some believe he's already fallen, unrecorded. Others believe fate is holding its breath. But the legend has created a dark kind of tension, an invisible hand gripping every excavation, every new descent into the money pit. You can feel it in the air when shovels strike rock, when water rushes in too fast, when a rope creaks just a little too loud in the wind. Still, the legend endures. Because it isn't just about the dead, it's about what they died for. Many believe the final death will trigger the unveiling of the truth. Kidd's treasure, yes, but more than that. A vault of secrets. A history rewritten. Proof that the past still breathes beneath our feet. Until then, the island remains quiet. Watching. Waiting. And Captain Kidd's ghost walks just behind you, smiling in the mist. By the dawn of the 21st century, the legend of Captain Kidd had outgrown its origins. It was no longer confined to salt-stained maps or buried chests. It had become something more, a symbol. A myth that lived in the hearts of those who dared to dream. Reality television took notice. In 2014, a new generation of treasure hunters brought the mystery to the global stage with the show The Curse of Oak Island. Audiences around the world watched as sonar scanned the seabed, as drilling rigs pierced the cursed soil, and as theories, some wild, others well-reasoned, fueled a modern-day obsession. Millions waited with bated breath for the next clue, the next artifact, the next glimpse of something lost to time. And always, the shadow of Captain Kidd loomed in the background. Historians debated his innocence. Was he really a pirate, or a scapegoat caught in a political storm? Was the treasure his, or had others added their own mysteries to the myth? Some scholars believe Kidd's buried hoard was a symbolic act, his way of resisting betrayal, of leaving a final word the British couldn't silence. But perhaps, just perhaps, the treasure was never meant to be found. Maybe it was meant to endure, like an unsolved riddle passed from generation to generation. A fire to keep burning in the minds of those who refuse to let go of wonder. After all, the true value of Kidd's treasure may not lie in gold or gems, but in what it awakens in us: curiosity, courage, obsession, or hope. And that may be the real legacy Captain Kidd left behind. Centuries have passed, and still the waves whisper his name, Captain Kidd. He was hanged as a pirate, yet remembered as something far more complex: a sailor, a privateer, a scapegoat, or a legend. The line between fact and fiction has blurred so much that historians often disagree on even the most basic truths. Did Kidd really bury multiple hoards of treasure? Or was the famed cache on Gardiners Island the only real deposit? Why did colonial officials take the effort to recover it so meticulously if it didn't mean something more? Some documents suggest Kidd tried to negotiate with authorities by offering the location of his treasure, implying there was more. Other letters, written by his wife, Sarah Bradley, hinted secrets he never dared speak aloud. There were rumors he kept maps and code, or that he passed clues on his deathbed to a trusted friend. But if so, they died with time, or were hidden too well. Even the name a Captain Kidd has become a kind of mythological code itself. Over the years, it's been invoked to sell books, inspire movies, and fuel expeditions, each one hoping to solve a puzzle that might not even have an answer. Yet the hope persists. Because stories, especially those buried in time, have a power no tide can wash away. And maybe that's the real treasure, not what was lost, but what was created. A tale so powerful it outlived its author. A riddle that still draws people to lonely islands with shovels in hand and stars in their eyes. The belief that buried beneath the moss, the roots, the stone, something waits. A key. A chest. A truth. Today, Captain Kidd's treasure remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the sea. Modern technology, drones, sonar, ground-penetrating radar, has scanned every inch of Gardiners Island and Oak Island, yet no definitive treasure has surfaced. Many experts now believe the true value lies not in gold or jewels, but in the story itself. The legend of Kidd has inspired countless explorers, authors, and dreamers, reminding us that some mysteries are more than just puzzles. They are mirrors reflecting our own desires for adventure, justice, and redemption. Even if the treasure is lost forever, Kidd's legacy endures, a timeless saga of a man caught between lore and lawlessness, fortune and fate. So next time you gaze out at the restless ocean, remember, somewhere beneath those waves and islands lies a secret, waiting patiently to be uncovered by those brave enough to seek it. Because as long as there are stories to tell and treasures to imagine, the spirit of Captain Kidd will sail on, across the endless sea of mystery and legend.